Welcome to How to Fail, the podcast that truly believes all failure is data acquisition. Before we get on to our guest, I wanted to remind you of my subscriber podcast, Failing with Friends, where my guest and I answer your questions and try to give some advice on your failures too. This week, I chat to the Real Housewife of New York, Jessel Taank. Do join in by following the link in the podcast show notes or look out for my monthly call-outs on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. As a child growing up in a close-knit Indian family in London, Jessel Taank was convinced Michael Jackson was her real father and that her own parents had kidnapped her from him. Although, spoiler alert, this wasn't true, Tank's belief that it might have been displays an early fascination with popular culture. After university in England, she became a fashion publicist and brand consultant, eventually setting up her own PR firm. Fast forward to the present day, and Taank has found her own fame, not through singing or dancing, but through her casting on the reboot of The Real Housewives of New York, one of the greatest reality TV shows of all time, in my opinion anyway. Taank was the first South Asian housewife and the breakout star of her debut season in 2023. She became instantly iconic for her dry humour, her fashion, her sandwich-obsessed husband, Pavitt, and for describing Tribeca as up-and-coming. But her storylines went deeper too. Taank spoke openly about the challenges of conceiving her twin sons through IVF and the misplaced shame she felt at not being able to have children naturally. As Brits, Taank has said, we don't talk about anything, and as Asians, we don't either. I'm definitely not someone that thrives in drama or uncomfortable situations. My go-to is just to ignore it or disappear. Jessel Taank, welcome to How to Fail.
What an introduction. And I love that Michael Jackson made it in.
We started with Michael Jackson.
As you always should.
Always.
And
we ended with conflict avoidance, which is so fascinating given what you now do.
Yeah. Isn't it though?
How does that work? So someone who, by your own admission, you like to sort of disappear from conflict. How has reality TV been for you?
Oh God, it's been the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I think that, and you're British, so I know you relate to this. We avoid conflict at any cost. As an Indian, British also, that's an added layer of conflict that we don't really want to tap into. It's been like, you're forced to face it. You're sort of thrown into the dragon's den, so to speak. I call it the Game of Thrones. There was no escape and you just had to figure it out.
We're meeting a couple of days after the part 2 of the reunion has aired. How are you feeling? Because for anyone who watched that season, it was a season that ended on a dark and troubling note. And I just want to pay tribute to how you navigated that and what a good friend you were to Uber. But how are you feeling about it all now? Are you still talking to everyone?
Yes. I mean, I'm still talking to everyone, but obviously there is this very clear tension that rocked the group. Real Housewives is supposed to be light, funny. It's like drunk women falling backwards in bushes. As a Bravo historian almost, it's not supposed to take the turn that it did. I think at the beginning of the season, we're talking about pigeons and it's like, it did feel very much like on par for what Real Housewives should be. And then it did, turn a corner and I felt very disappointed, to be honest. And I still feel like a little bit in limbo because it's such a weird note to end on.
Yes.
Although we did seem to find resolution at the reunion, I know that there are things that have happened that people will not be able to forget necessarily.
And for anyone who doesn't watch Real Housewives of New York, first of all, what are you doing with your time? Secondly, just to bring you up to date, the season ended with one of your cast members, Brynn Whitfield, revealing that she'd been sexually assaulted and raped by someone, which was so awful. And every single one of the women stood up in support of her. And there was a conflagration because Brynn believed that she had said to Uber that had happened to her, and Uber said that she hadn't. And so it's about everything that happened after that. But I thought you did a very good job of separating the two things, because we believe women when they tell us.
100%.
And at the same time, there are ways of being open and honest in friendship that we didn't necessarily see on
No,
screen.
definitely. And, I feel terrible for Bren because she obviously went through so much. And to have that be overshadowed by what it was, I can imagine for her it was very devastating. It must have taken a lot of courage for her to open up and be sort of vulnerable in that moment. And I just wish that it had played out differently.
And you obviously are originally British. So I'd love to talk to you a bit about your upbringing. So you were raised in London.
I was raised in London, just outside of London.
Okay.
A little town called Pinner in Middlesex. And, my parents, I think I've spoken a little bit about this, but my parents came to England as sort of it was a bit of a tumultuous time for them. They were sort of forced to move to England and to start their lives. And so the household that I grew up in, it was sort of filled with, this almost like struggle to kind of, make it in a way. They had to start from scratch. And so my upbringing was a very happy one. I had a lot of close family, a lot of close cousins, a lot of close friends. But it was almost overshadowed by this kind of very sad, I would say, background in a way.
And can I ask why they were forced to move?
Yeah, so they grew up in Kenya, in Africa, and due to political uprise, a lot of Indians were told to,
They were displaced?
Yes, displaced.
Okay.
Like it was something where, because they were, taking over businesses, and I think that maybe the African government felt threatened, and so a lot of the Indian community had to leave, and because they were part of the British Commonwealth, they ended up in England.
So that's so interesting how you've described it so well there. That sense that it was a very happy upbringing, but there was this underlying sadness because your family presumably had to leave behind everything they knew and start again.
Yes.
So were you aware from a young age that you had to work hard and strive to succeed because of that?
Yeah, a little bit. When you see your parents having to work so hard, my grandparents lived in a council home. You sort of like are exposed to, I wouldn't say we're working class, but middle class, but very hard working ethic. My parents pushed education. They really wanted me to succeed, just because all of those pillars would then, help me strive to become what I am or what I wanted to be. So they gave me the opportunities that I definitely have today. I'm so thankful for that. But I think a lot of the Indian community, we joke about it. It's very much a stereotype why we work so hard. I think it does come from our background and our parents and what they had to do.
Now, I'm familiar with your wonderful mother from on screen. She's made an appearance, quite a few appearances on The Real Housewives of New York. How does she feel about this turn that your career has taken?
I think at first they didn't really get it. They were obviously excited that I was given the opportunity, and it's such a rare, I think so many women would just, kill to be in my shoes. So the fact that I was in that position was, first of all, I was so lucky. And they saw that. But I think they are nervous for me. It's something that you can't control the narrative. You can't control sort of how you're perceived. And I think that made them very nervous because as Indians, we are very timid in a way, and we don't really expose a lot of who we are. We're very private as a culture.
So your first failure is that as a young girl, you failed to overcome Indian beauty ideals and you let the pressures of not living up to them almost undo you. So describe to me how you felt as a young girl. Did you feel pretty?
No. So I think, being Indian, I think that a lot of Asian cultures sort of have this ideal, to be fair. There is a very specific stereotype of what beauty is in India and in Asia. And that is, petite, fair-skinned, almost like porcelain-like. And I think growing up, I definitely did not fit that mold. And I felt it from a very young age. And it really did inform a lot of who I am and who I still am, Because I think when you don't fit a mold in your culture, you don't fit a certain stereotype, you feel sort of displaced. And I know that sounds really like a heavy term, but I really did. Like, I was obviously darker growing up. You see my mum, she's like, she doesn't look Indian at all. She almost looks Italian or something, else. So I almost felt like I was being compared in a way, like, oh, that can't be her daughter. She doesn't look like her. And I heard that from a very young age. And it was very tough, I think. I think my self-confidence took a dive. I was always questioning, this idea of beauty or what it means to be beautiful. And in a way, it was almost why I wanted to be in the fashion industry.
Yes, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And also, now that you're talking about it, the Michael Jackson thing makes sense as well. Like, that actually breaks my heart.
Oh my God, I didn't even connect the two.
Because that's someone who also struggled with his own skin, it feels like.
It's really funny you mentioned that. Yeah, I mean, he did grow up dark. I mean, I don't know what happened to poor Michael. I mean, he claims vitiligo, but like, maybe I did connect with him because of that.
But you did grow up in a time when racism, particularly in London, was still really prevalent.
Yeah.
How did that play out for you?
Yeah, racism was rampant. To be honest, I didn't really feel the weight of racism. My mum, on the other hand, and her family did. Like I said, they grew up in a council estate. So, I grew up with stories of my uncles telling me that they had to hide in their home. I think I heard one story where there was like bottles of like gasoline being thrown into their home. Like, they would light it and throw it into the letterbox. They had a very, very tough upbringing. I almost internalized what my mum went through because you see, like, she grew up in a very tough way. And so it was very, very sad for me to be a part of that, I think it informed who she is as well, and certainly informed her family, like, upbringing and what they had to do. My dad, on the other hand, had a little bit of a different upbringing. I'm sure he did experience racism, probably not in such a violent way, but he got to travel, and his family grew up with a little bit more means. And so I think that, he actually was able to have an education and actually sort of went through the motions of having friends and being able to experience his childhood a little bit better.
I'm very intrigued by that idea of inherited trauma and that you carry some of your mother's and even your uncle's sadness within you.
Oh, yeah.
So what was school like for you?
School was not bad. It was, I didn't feel segregated in school. I think, to be honest, I grew up in an area of London that was quite diverse. There was a lot of Indians. There was a lot of Asians. My best friend was Korean. And she was, my very best friend. We did everything together. So I grew up in a very diverse community, which I'm so grateful for, because it really, like, put a lot of perspective, a lot of international perspective to how I treat people and how people, hopefully treat me as well.
So with these childhood memories of not fitting in, quote unquote, to the kind of Indian ideal, how has it been going on television and being confronted with your appearance? Like, how do you feel about how you look now?
I've worked really hard to come to terms with the angst of it all. Like I said, as a child, I had so much lack of self-confidence. I was very shy. I wouldn't really talk to people. I couldn't really look people in the eye. It was such a far departure from who I am now. But I really worked very hard to kind of come to terms with being darker is beautiful. And I think there is a lot of, social, chatter about that, which helped, I think. One of my icons growing up was Naomi Campbell. And I think that she was someone that came on to the scene as this gorgeous supermodel that was, not a light-skinned model, and that embraced it so much. And targeting people like that for me was really helpful, because I'm like, oh, you can look like that and can be perceived as beautiful. And I think that there's been a lot of work done in the Indian culture itself where, we're not there yet, but there have been strides that have been taken to embrace women that are darker, and that, it's almost cool now, which, Jesus Christ, it took a while, but I feel almost accepted in a way. How that translates to the show, I really like talking about the fact that I didn't fit in and that I almost feel unique, because I think standing out is almost cooler than blending in.
Well, objectively speaking and sitting opposite you, I can confirm that you are so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
And you deserve to know that. But one of the things that as much as I love Housewives, I have a slight issue with is at the reunion when you are constantly asked what work you've had or not had done. And I felt like you were slightly singled out this last reunion for that. And how do you feel like that? Because I don't know, I feel uncomfortable.
The fact that Andy asked me, I wasn't offended because, I know he issued a statement about this. He does ask, I'm sure at every reunion, have you guys prepared?
He loves a boob job.
Loves a boob job, loves a nose job, loves a bit of, filler and Botox. For me, he's been so complimentary of, me and how I dress and how I look. And so I didn't take offense to it. I think where it went south was when Brynn chimed in and was like, well, I know what she's done to her face. And I think I was confused because I thought she was alluding to the fact that maybe I did more, like I had a nose job or, a facelift, which none of that is true. So there was a little bit of confusion on my part. And then she went to say that she introduced me to someone who, does injectables and that I ran out on a bill, which also didn't happen. So I think the whole thing took a bit of a dive and then it got really awkward. And then I think it was like, okay, well, what did you do? Like, and that was kind of the stress of it all.
Right.
But, I stand by the fact that I've only done Botox and filler. My mum would kill me if I did anything more.
Yeah.
She literally would. She'd spank me.
Okay, let's get on to your second failure, which is your failure to balance motherhood with personal ambition. I'm so, so happy that you're going to talk about this, Jessel. I really am. And when I knew you were coming on the podcast and I asked you for your failures, I was hoping that you'd bring something around motherhood up because you won't remember this, but I watched you the first season of Real Housewives. We didn't know each other, but you spoke openly, so profoundly and movingly about IVF. And I have also been through that unsuccessfully, but I felt so seen in what you were saying and you expressed yourself with such eloquence and sensitivity for those of us who understand it. And I DM'd you because I'm so grateful. And you got back to me, so it was very nice of you. But that's why I'm really happy that we get a chance to talk about it in more depth.
Yeah.
So tell me why you chose this failure.
It's a big part of, I think, who I am today. I still struggle with it. Growing up, when people would ask me, and I'm sure a lot of women get asked this question, how many kids do you want? And it's such a simple question. And I would always laugh and say, oh, I don't want kids. I would love a dog. I think as women, you are expected to bear children. And that is the role, right? Like it's, as soon as you get married, it's like, when are you having kids? Or, it's just something that is almost like forced upon us. The truth is, I was never maternal, or I never felt maternal. I was always very ambitious. And when I think about my successes, it was always surrounding my career. So when I did get married, I almost felt like the next step in the process was to have kids. And, we did delay it as much as we could. I wanted to travel and really experience, the world as much as I could. But there came a time where I knew my husband really wanted kids. And so when we started trying and it wasn't happening, I was really, I was like, wow, like maybe this isn't meant to be. But then it took a whole other turn for me because motherhood became really, really hard, or trying to be, a mother became really stressful. And it just kind of took a dive from there, I think. I almost became really frustrated. I became almost a shell of myself because I was then putting all this energy into trying to have kids. And I put almost my career on the back burner. And I think I was mentally checking out because I was like, okay, here we are. We're like in the thick of it. It took me 3 years to have kids. And I was like, those 3 years, I could have really focused on other things,
Yeah. I think when you go through IVF, I was very ignorant and naive when I first started doing IVF. And I did not realize that it's essentially like taking on a whole other job.
Yeah.
And if you already have a job, and not only if you have a job, but if you are someone as you are, who is used to applying yourself and getting the results, it's very difficult then to be pitched into this world of uncertainty and ambiguity where you are doing all of the work and sometimes the results just aren't fair. They're not happening for you.
Did you feel like you were failing?
Yes.
So did I.
100%. It's actually a large part of the reason why I launched this podcast.
Yeah.
And I think, and I don't know if you relate to this, but part of the reason I felt I was failing was the social conditioning that you're talking about, the idea that it's our biological imperative as women. But also I felt failed by my own body. And I felt that the medical language around fertility for women is often the language of failure. The phrases that often male clinicians use are the phrases of failure. So you have an incompetent cervix or an inhospitable womb, or you're failing to respond to medication. And that just really worms its way inside your psyche. And I don't know if you had that experience too.
Yeah, very much. I think, it is very much a social taboo to or a cultural taboo even to not be able to have kids at the blink of an eye, and it took it sucked the fun out of it for me. Then at that point, being a mother wasn't going to be fun because I already went through so much. And, again, you are put in this little bucket of oh, well, here you go. It's something that you're going to have to deal with. It's going to be such a struggle for you to get pregnant. And it's a big reason why I wasn't so open and honest about what I was going through, because I didn't want people to look at me in that way as a failure, and gossip and talk about how I wasn't able to have kids.
Because you didn't tell your family. It was really just you and Pavit going through it, just really, the two of you.
And a few friends who I chose to tell.
And can you take us back to what impact that had on your relationship at the time that you were going through it and you weren't sure whether you could get pregnant?
Yeah, I think I blamed him a lot. It wasn't his fault, but because he was the only person that was, in this with me, I took a lot of frustration out on him. And I think that he handled it like a pro, like he handles most things. But he was really my punching bag through the entire process. Financially, it took a toll on us. I mean, what were we, 100 grand, maybe 150 grand in at this point? And with no feasible light at the end of the tunnel, that's a down payment on a house. It was a very, very tough time for us in our relationship. I just remember one night I got the results of my third egg retrieval, and it was the same, song and dance, nothing was viable. And I just remember thinking, am I even supposed to be where I am right now? Is this a sign where I should be doing something completely different? Should I even be married? Should I just end this right now and just be, a successful entrepreneur and do it on my own? Those were the thoughts that were going through my head, because you just don't, if something's not working and it's hard and you're roughing it out, you're is this a sign that this is not my destiny?
Yes, I totally relate to that.
Yeah.
And do you mind my asking how many rounds you had to do?
Yeah, I did 5 in the end.
You're so strong.
How many did you do?
I did 2. Oh. So I did, this is a whole other podcast, but I was married before and I did 2 rounds in that marriage, and those 2 rounds were unsuccessful, but also highlighted that I wanted it more than he did.
Right.
And then I got pregnant naturally and had a miscarriage at 3 months. And that was devastating and ultimately the end of our marriage for various other reasons. It was kind of the catalyst.
Yeah.
And then I was 36, being oh, well, now what do I do? Do I concentrate on trying to find a fulfilling relationship, or do I try and get pregnant? And so I froze my eggs, very disappointing results, all of that, failed to respond to the drugs. And then I met my now husband on a dating app, and we got pregnant naturally just after my 41st birthday, had another miscarriage, but then that showed us how much we wanted it. And so then I did various procedures, and we ended up having another miscarriage, and then I did egg donation, and then that didn't work either.
Oh my God.
So it was a lot. It was attritional, and it was over a 12-year process.
Oh my goodness.
And I can talk about it now without crying, because I am truly at peace with the fact that I won't have a biological child in this lifetime. And it got to the stage for me where I did feel like, why am I pushing against this unforgiving obstacle so much when actually I'm so grateful for the relationship I have, and I'm surrounded by children in other ways, and I'm lucky that I have a fulfilling career. And so for me, I decided to let it go.
Right.
And that was 2 years ago.
And that takes immense amount of strength. I mean, kudos to you, because I think that to come to terms with something like that is so gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was hard.
Yeah.
I had an amazing psychic reading that really helped.
Oh,
I'll tell you about that later.
Those psychics, they know what to do and what to say at the right time.
The good ones are great.
The good ones are great. Yeah. Wow.
So you did 5 rounds.
Yeah.
And then you got pregnant on your 5th or on the 6th?
So I did 5 rounds, and then I did I'd never had a transfer before because we didn't have the viable embryos. So round 5, I think I had the viable embryos at that point. I did a transfer, and I begged my doctor to put 2 in, because it wasn't because I wanted twins and the cute twin thing. Like, I was just like, if this doesn't work, I need a backup. I need insurance in there. So I signed a waiver. He was like, this is not great. You know, we don't recommend you do 2 at one time. But I signed a waiver. And of course, those 2 little suckers stuck. And I was like, oh, crap. Well, here we go. We're having 2 at one time. But the feeling of, you know, after like this whole debacle, the feeling of getting pregnant at that time was just like, wow. Like, I was just so grateful. I was so excited to tell everyone. And then I had them and I was like, oh, crap. Like, they're there to stay. Like, now I have to really, it sounds so, I mean, don't call me out on this. But like, you know, it's like the excitement. It's like almost like, you know, when you would get engaged and then you're so excited for the wedding, and then the wedding happens and then you're like, okay, what now?
Yes.
That's how I was.
What's the next thing to focus on?
What's the next thing?
Yeah.
So I was like pregnant. I was so excited, and we told everyone, and like there was all of this hype. And then I had the kids and I was just like, oh crap. Like, it was almost like this moment where I was like, well, this is it. I have kids now.
Well, I also imagine that when you go through lots of fertility treatment and then you end up having the baby, is there part of you that feels like, I am not allowed to complain because I wanted this so much and I put us through so much? And I think sometimes women struggle with that, because obviously you are allowed to say it's really tough.
Yeah.
But there's probably part of you that feels like you're letting yourself down by admitting that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because Pavet's like, they are really expensive kids. Like, you better, you know, appreciate them in every which way. And I do, of course. Like, but again, going back to, are you maternal? I don't think I am still, which is such a weird thing to say, but I just am not.
I love hearing you say that. That's going to help so many women who are listening to this, honestly. And I think it's probably a far more common feeling than people imagine. Because what you're saying is, I don't think I'm maternal. It's not saying that you don't love your kids or that you're not an amazing mother, which you are.
Yeah.
Like, so what do you mean when you say you're not maternal?
In that I have my kids and I'm so grateful and they're amazing. But I don't want my life to revolve around the fact that I am a mother. I think it's one element of my life. And I hope that I'm doing a good job. And I wake up every day and, I hope that I'm raising them in the best way I can. But I have so many other ambitions that take priority, not priority, but like are the same level of priority, I would say. And coming to terms with that was really tough, because I think, again, because you're a mom, you're supposed to feel like that's kind of like the thing that you focus on. Pavet, being the person he is, has really almost taken that like role of being the mother and the father while I'm doing this, while I'm pursuing what I'm doing. And I'm so grateful for him, because he's just, he wakes up in the morning, he gives them breakfast, he'll take them to school, I'll do work stuff. Like, it's like he really is taking on this incredible role of, the main sort of like parent in a way.
Do you feel guilt?
No, I don't.
That's so great.
I don't. Because I think I give them enough, but I also don't want to shrivel up and die and not pursue what I set out to pursue.
Yeah. You said this amazing thing. I just want to find the quote because it's so funny and apt. It was about how having twins, okay, the way I like to describe it, you said, is you buy tickets to a rave and you want to go to the rave, but then when you're at the rave, you just can't leave. You're constantly dancing to the music and it's very intense.
How good is that quote?
So good.
By the way, I love a good rave.
Yeah. Well, how old are the twins now?
3.5.
And how is it? How are you doing?
So hard. Oh, it's so hard. Like now they're like mimicking, they're like mocking me. Like they repeat what I say in my like accent. And I'm just like, oh my God, they're like little monsters. I don't have family in New York. And so I can't, I think a lot of people are able to give their kids to their parents for a weekend or to, we don't have that structure here. So it's double as hard.
Yeah. I can sense that.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job. You and Pavitt are both doing a great job.
Thank you.
Now, for anyone who hasn't seen your first series, The Real Housewives of New York, you opened up, again, in a very courageous way about the knock-on effect that fertility treatment had on how you felt about your body and your intimacy with Pavitt.
Yeah.
Would you mind just speaking a bit about that for anyone who hasn't seen that? Because I think it's so powerful.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that. IVF is so isolating. I think that a lot of women who haven't been through it can't really understand what it means to go through, months of drugs and hormones. And it just very much like sucked my sort of identity in a way. As I was going through it, you feel bloated and you just don't feel like yourself. Imagine going through your period every month, for instance, and it's just like this constant, you just feel gross, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I felt for 3 years almost. For me, trying to get pregnant, it took a different path because I was almost putting all this pressure on him and it became work. Like when you're trying to get pregnant, it's like you have a schedule and I was like, let's go. And I don't think he enjoyed it either. So I think the intimacy really took a deep dive during those years of trying to get pregnant. And then when I had the kids, I also, I had a cesarean. I just needed to focus on me and not my marriage in a way. I know that sounds selfish, but
no, it doesn't. It sounds wise, actually. Like you had to do that. You have to put your own oxygen mask on before you can help the others.
A little bit. I really wanted to snap back and do all the things, but it just took a long time for me. I did have PTSD, to be honest, because I think I equated having sex to that, the motions of trying to get pregnant. And it did take a bit of a toll on our relationship. He was, again, Pavitt is like, can do no wrong. He's like so patient and really didn't pressure any of it. But, I knew that it was something I needed to step back into.
Yeah. It's so interesting you say that. At the end of these 12 years of fertility treatment, it was only once I was out of it that I understood the impact it had had on my body and how I felt about it. And I have recently got into weight training and it's been transformational for me for that reason, because I feel I'm back in my body and I feel really strong and good about it. Yeah. And that was denied me, and I'm sure you, for all of those years that you were going through it.
Because you can't control how you look and you're not even focused on that. Do you know what I mean? It's like you can't focus on feeling good because you're just pumping yourself with and it's almost like desperation, right? Like I felt desperate and I felt like I had to combat this thing. And you put everything sort of aside, like I said, my career, how I looked, how I felt about myself, my relationship, all those things took sort of a back seat.
I'm so glad you're on the other side of it, although I know that there is a third embryo on ice, a girl that you are very keen to have and that Pavitt is more cautious about.
Yeah, financially, I think it's like traumatizing for him. I would love to have a third child, but, I want to make sure that he's on the same page.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this season that you just saw was us trying to sort of like come to terms with what that looks like. And to be honest, I don't think he wants another kid. Like, I think for him, I'm going to say this, like, I think a lot of the focus was on me and my trauma. I didn't talk about Pavitt and what he went through. And I think a lot of people sort of dismiss the husband in these scenarios. He went through a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, he was dealing with my nonsense. He was paying for all the treatments. And, I know that was hurting him. And I'm sure it was really tough on him. But I never asked, we never talked about it because I was so selfish in that moment. I was like, I can't get pregnant, And I'm sure that it was very hard for him.
I love how you go to bat for Pavitt. And how you do for each other, actually. I think you've got a really beautiful relationship.
Thank you.
And I know it's come under some scrutiny, but I just see two people who really love each other and who are interdependent rather than codependent.
Oh,
which I love.
1,000%. Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because it's I feel like I'm constantly having to justify our relationship. And I'm really done with it. I'm not stepping up and gonna, justify anything that I don't feel like I need to anymore.
Preach. Let's get on to your final failure. Ooh. It's a big one.
I know,
final failure is failure to understand the mechanisms of reality TV.
Yeah, it's a big one.
So you said that you went into it naive and you didn't really have self-confidence.
Yeah, I really didn't. I didn't know what this was that I signed up. I really didn't.
How did you get to be on it then? What happened?
So they built the show around a group of women. So being in the fashion industry, I was kind of, I was introduced through one of my friends. And when I was being cast, there was something very much inside me that was like, oh, this is fun. It will be a fun dinner time story. How I auditioned for the Real Housewives of New York. I never thought I would get it. But in hindsight, it goes back to my self-confidence, because I didn't think I was good enough for it. I didn't think that why would they want me? Why would they want, why would they choose me? And the answer to that question is I'm funny, I am fashionable, and I'm really a big personality. I just didn't believe in myself.
So when you say the mechanisms of reality TV and your failure to understand them, what are the mechanisms?
So
no detail is too niche for me.
Oh, I know. I know you're chomping at the bit right now. What are the mechanisms? When you look at reality TV, and let's take the Kardashians, for instance, it is this whole production following your life. And you just see the Kardashians on your screen and, the glam and What goes into a show is so much more than that. And it's the different, dynamics of your castmates and what your character is, because there are characters on a reality TV show, even though you're not privy to it. I think it plays a role, right? I didn't know that was the case. I thought that I was going to be your token Indian girl. I'm sweet and funny. I'm in fashion, and everyone loves me because I've never really had conflict the way I've had on the show in my life. I think in real life, you're able to, if you have conflict with someone, you're able to talk it through, and it's not, aired on national television. You don't have all these people commenting on, your moves per se. But I was just so naive about the whole thing.
So when you have conflict on the show, just plucking one from the ether, that you were 20 minutes late for Sai when you were meeting for breakfast that time or lunch.
She'd kill me for that, yeah.
What happens? Because as you say, in real life, you might air it then and there, or you wouldn't mention it and you just go about your business. But do production get involved, and do they retain some information but drip feed you some other information and then encourage you to talk about it on screen?
So here's the biggest mistake I made. I treated it like a show. In reality, you don't treat it like that. You treat it as if I was in real life, if I was going to be 20 minutes late, I would text my friend and say, babe, I'm so sorry. I'm running 20 minutes late. Go ahead and order. I'll be there as soon as I can. I didn't text her. I texted production.
That's so interesting.
I'm 20 minutes late. And I don't know if that was communicated to her. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was the biggest mistake I made.
Yes.
And across the board, I should address things in real time with the person and not the production of it all.
Yes.
And it was like an aha moment for me.
And so then what happens? So you filmed a season, and then I'm imagining that you're watching it for the first time and you're seeing other women in scenes that you weren't part of, potentially saying mean things about you, or in confessionals saying mean things about you, or things that are willful misunderstandings. How does that feel? It's
so tough. Like, imagine that doesn't happen in real life. Like, if someone's talking, shit about you behind your back, the likelihood of you ever finding out is quite, it's like low. But then to have to watch that on TV, but not only you're watching it, like everyone's watching it, it is really, you have to have thick skin. I was just like gobsmacked. The first season, I was just like, whoa, this is crazy. And then you've got the whole social mechanism of it all. Like, you've got, the reality show, and then you've got the social of it all. And that's a whole other layer because, people, I think with reality TV, people feel so comfortable commenting about you. And it's not like you're playing a role on a movie. You are you. So they feel like they can go to your Instagram and comment on everything about you. It was so crazy.
I could not cope. I just want to salute you for being able to.
Barely surviving.
Do you think it's made you stronger?
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. You have to really train your mind and your brain emotionally and mentally to kind of go to a place where you keep telling yourself, these people don't know you. They really don't. They know what...
About social media people or your castmates?
The social media people.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Like, in order to... Imagine going to someone's Instagram, finding them, going to someone's Instagram and saying mean stuff on their page, knowing that they're going to see that. And you don't know that person. It just takes a certain character to do that. And I have to keep telling myself, they don't know you. So what they're seeing and how they're translating that and how that's coming out is not real. So you sort of create this almost fictional bubble that you put yourself in.
I had a conversation with name drop Jay Shetty once.
Oh, yeah.
And he had such great advice for dealing with social media criticism. He said it's like someone coming to your street and standing outside your house who doesn't know you, just shouting insults through the window. And you've got to decide whether that person is welcome in your house. And ultimately, they're not, because it's your house. You keep your house how you want to keep your house. And that is your Instagram page or your Twitter account, X account, or your TikTok account. And I found that very helpful to put it in that context.
It's a great analogy. It really is. It really takes a person to have thick skin to be able to tolerate. I've been called a terrible mother. I've been called an absolutely hideous wife, an awful daughter. I was told that, I'm representing to the Indian community, and why the hell would they choose this girl to be that face? And, it's just it makes you question everything you are to your core.
Do you have strategies now to cope with that?
Yeah, because you've got to protect the peace.
Definitely. What do you think filming The Real Housewives has taught you about friendship?
Oh, that's such a loaded question.
I know.
It's really interesting because I think that almost my friendships throughout my life, I've really worked hard to nurture them. My friends are like my family, and I've really taken it upon myself to make sure that they know that. And I work really hard at being a good friend. I think the friendships on the show, it's so different because there's almost an agenda behind those friendships, a strategy maybe. It takes what I know as friendship and sort of adds a whole other meaning to it. By the way, I didn't go into this with a strategy. I think, to be very clear, I really took it upon myself to want to get to know every single one of these women in the most innocent and positive way possible. I just don't know that that was the case for others.
Yes. There's a transactional element.
Very
it feels
much.
Yeah. So would you consider any of them real friends?
Yes, I do. And I think that...
All of them?
No.
Okay. Who would you consider a real friend?
Not all of them. I do think that, you see who, you connect with. I have to say Jenna is someone that on the show and off the on screen and off screen, she is who she really is. It doesn't feel transactional with her. I feel like, we can joke about things and I can tell her things and she won't get offended. Or if she is offended, she would tell me and we'll actually have an adult conversation about it. There's so many layers. But on the flip side, I also feel so close to these women because we're going through something that like you really don't understand unless you're in it. I had dinner with Sai last night and it just like, she feels like a sister to me. And that's so weird to say because, we had a very rocky, tumultuous start, but she's someone that I feel so close to because we've been through something in such a short amount of time together.
Are you still friends with Uber?
I am, yeah.
Oh, thank God.
Oh my God, of course.
You didn't mention her.
Oh, no. I mean, I was getting to her. I'm actually seeing her tomorrow.
Oh.
Again, she's someone that from the get-go, I felt like culturally we really connected because obviously she comes from Africa, she's Muslim, she really understands almost the cultural restraint that I bring with me. She's someone that's very wise and that really has a very pure, beautiful soul.
Your friendship with Uber was one of my favorite things of this season because it felt so real and so much of its strength seemed to happen off camera, which meant that I, as a viewer, could really trust it.
Yeah. I really hope so. And, I go back to that night a lot. And I always tell her, I was like, I think I don't know if they showed it, but I was sort of like hovering in a way outside her door. She hadn't eaten. I went to see if she wanted to eat. But I just don't think I could have slept that night without telling her what I knew. And something deep within me knew that she didn't know. Like, I think that she knew that what Brynn was saying, accusing her of, like, that wasn't the case. And I followed my gut in that moment. And I am so glad I did.
Yeah. This has been such a joy, Jessel.
Oh, you as well. Like,
honestly.
I know in the first 2 or 3 seconds of meeting someone if I'm going to like them. And I know that sounds really like judgy.
No, it sounds instinctive.
It's very like I go off of vibes and energy and it gives Burning Man, I know. But like I am a vibe person and I just met you and I was just like, she's my girl.
Oh, thank you so much for trusting me. And thank you for always showing up as your authentic, real self because
it's such an honor
I love it and we love it. So never change.
Thank you. And honestly, it's an honor to be sitting here opposite you.
That means so much to me. Thank you. And you're not going yet because you're staying for Failing with Friends where you get to answer listener questions. So now the pressure's off you, Jessel.
Okay. Hot seat.
We heartily recommend you follow us to get new episodes as they land on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please do tell all of your friends. This is an Elizabeth Day and Sony Music Entertainment original podcast. Thank you so much for listening.